Hey friend, Graham Cochrane here. So I got a cool video for you today. If you've ever considered jumpstarting your online business through one-on-one coaching, then this is going to be a really helpful resource for you. A lot of what I teach is how to create automatic passive income, evergreen sales through online courses and recurring membership sites. That's a big chunk of what I do. Another part of what I do is one-on-one coaching, creating coaching packages, sort of high-priced coaching packages for people that work directly with me. Sort of you step up, there's a YouTube video here, then you buy a course, you join a membership, you join a mastermind, you get more and more access, and the price goes up, and then one-on-one coaching is kind of at the top. Now, today I've got an interview for you with Tanner Chidester, who's a mega digital entrepreneur. He's got an incredible company called Elite CEOs that's a huge team doing tens of millions of dollars a year. And his story is crazy. I mean, the speed at which this guy has grown his business is pretty phenomenal, starting in the fitness industry and then moving into the entrepreneur space at a really young age. It's pretty incredible, but really a big part of the secret to his success was one-on-one coaching. So I got connected with Tanner and I wanted to collaborate, but what I wanted to bring him on my channel for was to talk to you specifically about the way he sets up his coaching packages, finds clients, prices them, all of this stuff we talk about in this interview. Tanner was pretty open about not only how he got his start, but literally how he would suggest you find clients, land the deal, interact with people who either already know you, sort of a warm lead, maybe your email list, maybe your followers on social media, or even how to find people through cold traffic or people that don't even know you and make a connection. There's a lot of great sales approaches inside this conversation that apply to anything you're selling that I think are really helpful. And I think what I love about Tanner is, as he'll say later in the interview, he loves one-on-one coaching because he believes it's the fastest way to reach an income goal. Because you don't have to create a product, you don't have to create a bunch of sales copy on a page, you don't have to build a huge audience. You can sell a high-ticket package to a few people and hit your income goal sooner. And in a lot of ways, he's right. This is something I teach in my course, Automatic Income Academy. But if you've ever been interested in coaching, this is a great person to learn it from because this is how he built his business. So enjoy the interview. Take a lot of notes because there's a lot of very specific nuggets. He didn't hold back. He gave a lot of good, juicy stuff in this interview. And also, don't forget to click on the link below in the description to not only check out his channel, but he's giving away a free mini course on how he does some of this landing coaching packages and coaching clients stuff that we talk about in the interview. So if that's interesting to you and you want to dive into it more, he's got an entire free mini course that might be helpful for you as well. So sit back and relax and enjoy my interview with Tanner Chidester. Well, hey guys, I'm here with Tanner Chidester from Elite CEOs and Fit Warrior, and I'm pumped to have a conversation with him to help you think about high ticket coaching, think about how to scale your business in a different way. If you're just doing courses, he's got a phenomenal story. And as I shared a little bit in the intro, he's grown very quickly and a lot of that has to do with coaching. So we're going to talk about that. Should be fun. So Tanner, thanks for taking some time out of your day today. I know you're not at home, you're traveling. So thanks for waking up early.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. And I was telling Graham, everyone, this lighting is not what I'm used to in Miami, but we're excited to pump this out for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. We thought it'd be a good conversation to have because Tanner's in both worlds. He's done programs, he's done coaching. And I really want to continue to serve you guys with other ways to scale your business. And Tanner's kind of done that in a huge way. So I'm glad we got connected and we could have the conversation. But for people that don't know your story or haven't seen you around, I guess I know your first business was Fit Warrior. So you were coming into online business through the fitness space. Mm-hmm. Could you just give us a little bit of background on how you got to that business, why you started it? What were your initial goals when you started that? And what were you thinking when you started online business? Because I always love that initial story for people.
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in a family of 7 kids. I got 4 sisters, 2 brothers, LDS or Mormon background. So pretty conservative household. My dad was a teacher. So growing up, I never tried to overplay it. Some people are like, I was like living on the street. It wasn't like that. But, I didn't have more than I needed. Like they would give us like the necessities and like everything else that's on you. So growing up, I'd see my parents budget a lot. And so at a young age, I was also bullied a lot. So around 12, I started working out, and then the goal was so that kids would leave me alone because I was bullied a lot. I had two sisters, so tea parties and dress up I thought was kind of normal, and so I guess I'd say like maybe I was kind of weird for my age, and so what ended up happening is I started working out, and then people started respecting me, and they didn't mess with me, and all of a sudden like girls would start talking to me, and I was like, wow, this is kind of nice. Like I put in work, I get results. And that really kind of set the stage for the rest of my life because it really kind of imprinted in my head that if I set a goal and I work hard for it, I'll get it. So all through school after that, I was very serious about football. I wanted to play in the NFL, and I was able to get all the way to the Division I level, but I kept getting injured. And I knew at some point also just playing with first round draft picks, I played with a few of them, they just were genetically and superior to me in every single way. And I kind of knew at that point, it's like, okay, these are the guys who play in the NFL. So after being hurt 100 times, I stopped that. And that was a really hard time for me in my life because until that point, my identity was I was a football player. And a lot of athletes go through that. So I actually had lunch with a guy named David Fry, who is married to one of Russell Brunson's cousins. And so we sat down and he's like, what's your goal? What do you want to do? Is like, dude, I just want to make as much money as possible because of how I was raised. I don't want to live that way. And again, it wasn't in a bad way. It was just, I never wanted money to be the reason I couldn't do something. Right. And so he goes, well, you're going to have to start your own business. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. I didn't know the first thing about business. So he convinced me with about a year left of engineering school, which is a 6-figure salary right out. You're going to be 21 years old making 6 figures to drop out. So I call him on the phone and I'm dropping out and I had great grades. They're like, are you sure you want to do this? Like they were surprised. They're like, because it was almost like being at Harvard, I guess you could say, for engineering. Because I was at Texas A&M. They're very prestigious engineering school for petroleum engineering. So anyways, I drop out, I move home and I start working out of his office. And in terms of your question of why I started in fitness, it was just what I knew. He said, start something in fitness. Like you've been doing fitness your whole life, it. And I was like, okay. And so he started teaching me all about funnels and opt-in pages. And I basically, over a year, built an entire course, start to finish, a full PDF, like a 100-page ebook and a recipe book. And I did all these things and it was a total flop when I went to sell it. But what I didn't know at the time is I learned all these things that were going to help me later. I really learned a lot of stuff that I take for granted now that a lot of people don't understand. So after that, I'd been there for a year. I'm about 23. I'm like, hey, I need to kind of like get on my own. Like I'm at my parents' house. It's kind of weird. So I move out and I start working as a server and doing door-to-door sales from about 23 to 25. And I'm still trying to get this business to work, but I'm just not making any money. It was a $47 program called the Rapid Muscle System. And I didn't really know how to sell or market. So finally at the age of 25, I make this decision where, hey, if I don't figure it out this year, I'm going to go back to school, because the narrative before is just people, hey, you got time, you're young. And I was like, yeah, I do got time. I am young. And then at 25, it just didn't feel that way anymore. And I remember being embarrassed to like take girls on dates. And I had how old was my car? 20 something years old. And I was like, man, I'm too smart to be living this way or not hit my goals. So I was scrolling on Facebook and I saw this ad, similar to what people may see in me now. And it was like, how to start your online fitness business. And I was, hey, yeah, I could do that. And so I click on it, I sign up, no idea what high ticket sales were. I had $2,000 in my bank account, I think, and I paid $3,000 on a credit card. And then I went in there and they basically just said, hey, so instead of selling your course, just message these people and sell it for a higher price at $1,500. And I was like, dude, there's no way someone's going to buy fitness coaching for $1,500. Like, I wouldn't do that. They're like, no, they'll do it. Just try it. I'm like, okay. So I had door-to-door sales background. I was good at speaking to people. So I just started messaging people off my Instagram. And in that first week, I made $10,000 in sales. And I quit everything and I went all in. And then since then, I've done, 25 plus million. But the irony is that all those things before prepared me for that moment, which I didn't realize at the time. But I didn't realize how easy it was to do. And it was actually, I was actually relieved, but I was also very frustrated because of how hard I'd been trying, and I was this close the entire time. But that's my story in a nutshell, start to finish. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. I think there's something, one thing you said there about like, yeah, you're young, you've got the time to figure this out, but you felt like that pressure of, I'm giving it time, but I need to be realistic. Like I have to put a cap on how much time. I don't want to just keep going on forever. So I think there was some urgency there that led you to try something. And I know a lot of people have had similar stories where there's some point of desperation that pushes you a little bit harder than if you just had all the time in the world to figure this thing out.
Yeah. I think something that I take for granted is when you're single and you don't have kids or a wife or a girlfriend, that's the best time to take risks, because if it goes wrong, like you can sleep on a floor, it's no big deal. But when you got kids and a wife, it changes, because now you're thinking about them. And so I think that was kind of what it was for me, is I'm going, I'm 25, like I haven't had a girlfriend in about 4 years. I literally barely dated, barely did anything. And I was getting to that point in my life where I said, hey, if I don't start, making something of myself, not only am I not going to be where I want to be, but, I'm not going to find a girl who wants to be with me because I don't have my life together. So I think there's something to be said about kind of burning the ships in a sense, where I never had a coach before, but I was so desperate to make stuff work that I paid money that I never would have paid before. I over those 3 years, I had tons of people approach me for coaching. I was like, no, I don't need to pay for that. I'll figure it out. And then I finally paid for it. And I'll even say this, a lot of the coaching I pay for, it's not necessarily, I go in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. But it could just be one or two things. And for me, like literally just going in there and someone saying, hey, sell it for a high ticket price, message people. I mean, that took 30 seconds to tell me, but it completely changed the trajectory of my entire life. And so was that worth the money? Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Absolutely. And so what's interesting about this conversation is, right, so they were saying sell what you're already selling in your course, but sell it as a service, coach somebody one-on-one. So the value goes way up because now they have access to you, and sell it at a high ticket price. So when you transitioned and you were messaging people, like, did you just go off of that price they told you of like, it was just like $1,500, or did they walk you through like, hey, here's some package ideas? And what would you say to people that are starting out? Like, how do you think about, you have the knowledge, your knowledge was fitness, and now you want to package it as a coaching package. How do you think about pricing? Like how many calls, how long are those packages? What would you suggest for people to think about when they're putting together their first coaching packages?
Yeah, those are all great questions. So what I did is I think a 3 or 4 month program is the standard, 12 weeks or 16 weeks, give someone time to go through it. For me, I've always liked selling 4-month programs because you're able to charge a little bit more, and then the value seems to go up quite a bit for people. But it's also not so long that people default. The one bad thing about high ticket sales is that at volume, you're going to have people who possibly default by giving them extended payment plans, right? Because if someone's paying, $3,000-$4,000 a month, that's enough money for them to question, hey, am I going to pay it this month? Do I want to pay it this month? Especially if that first month or second month hasn't gone well. So I typically like to do 4 months. When I was selling fitness specifically, I went up as high as about $3,200 for 4 months. So it's about $800 a month. And I just trial and tested it. And what I found, at least in fitness, was if I sold, 2,500 was a sweet spot. If I sold below that, it was really easy, but I was leaving money on the table because people would be willing to pay more. But if I went above 2,500, it'd get a little harder, but I could still close them on those higher price points. So you really have to decide where it's at in your business, also based off the margin. When I was running a lot of ads, so I needed a little bit more margin as well. And some people forget about that. Sometimes like, man, why is this program 10 grand? But if you got 40 employees and you're running, $10,000 a day of ads, it starts to make sense. But typically I'd say 4 months, and then, you can start at 1,500 and work your way up. And I would just keep testing new price points. And the way I would do it without losing the sale is you can always drop the price, you just can't raise it. So, a lot of people overthink price dropping, but I could say it's $1 million. But if the person says no, I can always say, okay, cool. Well, what were you thinking? What's the most you can do if I'm genuinely trying to help? And then you can always drop it back down. So I just found over time and trial and error and running ads to cold traffic specifically that 2,500 to 3,200 was kind of that sweet spot. I sold deals as high as 6,000 for fitness for 4 months. And I sold deals as low as 1,000, but I found that for the most part, if you found someone who made about, let's say, 60, 70,000 a year, they'd be willing to spend as much as about $3,000. And then obviously your goal is to get them to pay up front, but if they couldn't, as long as, you broke that out, if it's a 4-month program, it's all fine and dandy. So yeah, hopefully I answered the question. Okay.
Oh, no, that's great. There's a lot of good stuff there. One is, I think, first of all, you talked about price elasticity. You were kind of playing around and finding a sweet spot. And I think so many people are so obsessed with figuring out the perfect price and having to figure that out now as if you can't ever change it. But also, I hope you all who are listening paid attention to what Tanner was saying, is that communicate the value of the coaching by having what you think is a fair but higher price. And if they can't pay it, he asks a really fair question like, okay, well, that makes sense. Well, what were you thinking? That's a great question. What were you thinking? What could you afford? And it forces them to give you an answer of something that is more in line. And then you could always drop it to meet them if you really need to land a client. I thought that was a really conversational and low pressure way to price drop.
Correct. And you don't want to just price drop because, when you're thinking of sales, the goal is, ultimately, like we're all being honest, we want to make as much as possible for I don't know if saying the least amount of work's the right phrase, but you're trying to help people out, but you're also like, hey, I'm running a business. I want to make as much as possible. So by putting it in their shoes and saying, look, I'm willing to help, but I need to know what you were even thinking. It allows you, one, to see how valuable they think the service is. Because if they're like, well, I thought it was gonna be like $100. I mean, where you're at and where they're at are light years away, and you need to go and fix that. Or two, if it's reasonable and they're like, 3,000 is a lot, but I could do like 2,500. You're like, okay, who cares? Like, it's not worth this huge fight to be on the phone an extra 50 minutes for $500. And so that's kind of the reason to ask, because a lot of people immediately go to price dropping without really figuring out where that person's mentally at. And so they not only lose money, but it can also come off kind of salesy. And the thing that I learned with sales is, if you really start thinking about that person and you're really trying to do what's best for them, it should sound more conversational, right? Because really, to get people to make decisions, they have to decide for themselves. The more pushy you are, you can say things like, hey, I understand you're scared X, Y, and Z. You do need to make this decision because of that, but it's ultimately your decision. It should feel conversational to that person, because if they feel forced into it, you're not going to get a lot of sales that way. It really they have to think it's their idea. It's just like a little kid. If you say, well, hey, what do you think about the pink shirt? Like, yeah, I like the pink shirt too. You're kind of influencing them, but they feel like it's their choice. And that's kind of how sales works for everything. People need to feel like they're making a decision. No one likes to really feel forced into stuff.
100%. I've always felt and told people, even just on a sales page with sales copy, you can't ever manipulate someone into doing something. People are going to do what they want to do, but you can offer and you can make the case for the value, and you can connect with them and make sure it's a good fit for them, which is kind of what you're doing too. You're making sure this is a good fit for you. And where you were talking about price, it sounds like they do want it. It is a good fit, but it's really getting hung up on the price. Can you talk us through like the way you would find back then and how you recommend people find clients? You mentioned social media, and when are you reaching out to people that you already know, or is it people that follow you, or you're reaching out to complete strangers? And if so, what's the trajectory of starting that rapport, starting that conversation, so you even have the opportunity to find out what their goals are and find out if you have a chance to offer your coaching to them? What would you say for people that have never done that before?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So when I first started, I started with the lowest hanging fruit. So it was just my followers, and at that point I've been posting a lot of fitness content. I did fitness modeling at the time. So I already had some people who followed me just for that reason, but I never actually sold anything. So I think part of the reason, besides, I'm just straight up with people, door-to-door sales, obviously it's helped me tremendously know how to speak to people. But, those people have been following me for a while. So when I finally reached out and offered a service, it's kind of like a course launch. It's easy because it's the first time, oh, he's actually offering something. So you'll get a lot of those initial sales. But I guess there's two ways to look at it. people who follow you and people who don't. So when they follow me, I could go right into the pitch. I just say, hey, I saw that you follow me. Super glad to connect to you. You know, what are your fitness goals? I would just straight away ask, because in my head, they're already following me. So if I'm reaching out to them, they're going to be receptive to it. And so a lot of times, oh yeah, Tanner, you know, here's my fitness goals. I was like, awesome. And then I would get right into that conversation. You know, typically it'd say, so cool, what's your goal? They tell me, you know, what are you struggling with? They tell me, what have you tried before? They tell me. And then I'd say, okay, cool. It makes sense. Like, have you ever had a coach before? No, I haven't had a coach before. Any reason? Oh, you know, just never got around to it. I say, cool. Well, I don't know if you care or not, but I do this fitness stuff all day long. And I'd have some tips for you if you got time for a 10-minute call. And they'd say, yeah, it sounds good. I was like, cool, here's my number. What's yours? And then I would actually set up a triage call typically. Until I started running paid ads, I would do a 2-call close. So I get on, kind of get them to like me. And they're like, oh, Tanner's cool. I'd ask similar questions. And then after that call, I'd send them an email, which was kind of my application that would have, you know, what's your height, what's your weight, et cetera. But then say, hey, you know, are you willing to invest in yourself? Are you willing to do this? Kind of more of those questions before I take an hour sales call. And then on the sales call, they would kind of know what's going to happen. So those were the easiest people. If you don't have a following and you're having to reach out to people who don't know you, what I typically would do is go to hashtags on Instagram, and I would type in like fit mom, fit dad, anything that had the word fit in it typically. And I'd click, and then I would scroll down the page as fast as I could until I'd see someone who's overweight. And when I say fast, I mean, it was like fast, because some people, what they don't realize is if you're too slow, that's a problem too, because the goal is like the more conversations you have, the more calls you have, the more sales you have. So I'd see someone who's possibly overweight, and I'd check their profile, make sure they're not a Beachbody coach, they're not putting like personal trainer, like it doesn't, what people don't get is if they don't want the help, you can't convince them that they need it, right? Like people have to be open to it. It's kind of something Jordan Belfort would say when he does, you know, sell me this pen. You can't sell it to someone who's not looking for one. So I'd say something typically just to relate. Hey, do super sick Corvette. I love Corvettes. Hope it's not weird I reach out and said that, but I love the car. And obviously when you're complimenting, almost 90% of the time someone, if they see it, oh yeah, thanks so much, man. Like super appreciate it. Like, yeah, absolutely. I love it. Just curious, what do you do for work? And it can also be like about kids with women. A lot of times I'm like, hey, I'm from a family of 7. You got 2 cute kids. I hope that's not weird for me to say. And I'd always would say something typically like, I hope it's not weird for me to say, because it makes it more normalized, right? Because a lot of people, when they reach out, they do think it's weird to reach out. They don't know you. So by saying, hey, I hope this isn't weird, they're like, yeah, like it's cool. And then I would typically go, so, you know, what do you do for work? I do X, Y, and Z. I say, does that keep you busy? Right? And like, oh yeah, it keeps me super busy. And then this is where I would transition into the sell. I say, oh, totally get that. You know, X, Y, and Z. Does that make it hard to work out? And they're like, yeah, it kind of does actually. And then all of a sudden I'm in the pitch without making it salesy, because some people will go in and they would start saying, you know, yeah, like, do you have fitness goals? And they're like, dude, like, you know, you're trying to sell me. I don't know you. But by doing that and just saying, hey, does it keep you busy? It does sound conversational, like, oh, cool. Like, does it make it hard to work out? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. Like, do you have goals right now? Like, do you have fitness goals? Yeah. Like, I'm trying to lose 30 pounds. And I'm like, oh, what's the struggle you've been having? And all of a sudden it sounds very conversational. And then I would go through that process the same way. I'd get them on a call and then I'd sell them. So it does change when you start running ads. You don't have to go through that long of a process, but it was a cool feeling for me, because I knew at that point in my life, I was like, you know, worst case scenario, if something bad ever happens to me, I know that I can reach out to someone who has no idea who I am, get them on a call and still sell them something at a high price and live a good life. Because, you know, for most people, if you sell 3 of those a month, like you're good. You don't really need to make more money than that. But that's kind of how the process went. And a lot of my trainings are super specific around that process and like what to say, how to say it, like they do this, you do that. Because a lot of people, they don't realize how important it is in online business, especially high ticket sales.
That's amazing. Guys, Tanner just gave you a ton. And I hope you're seeing if you're watching this, the trend and sort of the thread, I at least what I'm seeing through your approach, Tanner, is, and what I like about being able to sell one-on-one with somebody versus like sales copy. Sales copy is almost harder because it's not two-way, but you're asking so many questions, and questions they're like disarming. Like you're not coming hard at them with anything. Because you're actually qualifying them too, to make sure what you have to offer is a good fit. But there's some really good questions in there, like, what have you tried before? Even for people who you already know want fitness help, what have you tried before is a great question. Have you worked with a coach? Oh, you haven't? Why not? Like, these are really great questions to not only prime them, but it's also giving you information as well to know like what their hang up is. You're trying to figure out objections without forcing anything. Questions are so disarming. So I love that approach. And I also love that you're aware of the value in connecting with someone on a human level, especially when you're a complete stranger, because I think that is the hardest thing. And I don't know about you, but like when I see stuff online, there's so many more people selling stuff online, and they're just either they're copying somebody or they don't have this kind of nuance of trying to actually connect. They just want to make the sale. And so it just all feels weird. Like you said, it all feels random and like a total stranger. So it's even more like in today's climate, even more important to actually try to connect with somebody, have rapport before you ever get to the pitch. And I think that takes a level of confidence, maybe, of like, hey, I don't need to make this sale today. I just need to start to have conversations with people. I think the best salesmen and saleswomen of all time have known this. When you're at a car dealership and somebody walks on, you don't have to close them the second they walk on. You want to make a connection. You want to be of service to them. And maybe they come back and they test drive another car next weekend, but eventually you'll make the sale if you ask enough questions to build rapport.
I think, yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I think part of it is having confidence in the process. So I think the hardest thing when people start new things, like I'm even starting new business ventures. I want to start a tech company, which is completely different than online business, but so I'm kind of in that moment where like, man, how do I do this? Right. Even though you may kind of have a little bit of an idea, and, you get a lot of experience by just doing. So I think for me, what really made it easier to sell too, and what a lot of people don't understand, is when I first started, I was super nervous, but after I kind of tested and tweaked the conversation, you start to get less nervous and you start to not care as much, because you realize, hey, this process works. And if I follow this process, the people who want it will buy, and the people who won't. And so you stop feeling so pressured to be in control, because you're really not in control. But you know that this process will push the prospects through. And so what that actually does is you sell more, because people don't feel the pressure on the call. People can feel it, right? Like even I can. Like, and if someone comes to me and they say, all right, well, it's this much, but if you pay today, it's this much. I'm like, hey man, like, I got a big company. Like, you're not going to force me into something I don't want to buy. That's just stupid. Right. And I think a lot of people, they can read through that. Now, it can get a little easier when it's not a business opportunity and it's more of like a fitness offer. They don't get sold to as much as maybe like guys like you and me. But yeah. I will say, to your point, yeah, like you get more confident when you see the process work, and then you realize that if you just follow the process, some will buy and some will not, but it's not really up to you. The people who want it will buy, versus you're going, well, like, did I do something wrong? Like, why didn't they buy? And that used to drive me crazy when I started sales, because I was like, was it me or was it them? Was it me or was it them? But after you have confidence in that, and you know for a fact, like, they weren't going to buy no matter what, or like this person's going to buy, it's easier to relax on the call, because you don't care. You just like, I know I'm going to make the money. It's not a big deal. And that is something, it's easier said than done when you're making money. I totally understand that. But that is something that's really helped me as well, because when you don't seem to care as much, that person can tell. And then they're like, maybe this is a good idea, because they don't want to feel pressure. And I used to have that mistake on calls where people, they could tell like I needed that money. Like, yeah. I was like, oh, you got to buy. Like, I'm not going to pay rent. So just another point to that perspective. Yeah. Oh, no, that's so huge. And this is just like a larger conversation about sales in general. People smell desperation, man. They smell it like blood on the water. But I do think there's something to that. So I'm interested. So what I teach my students to do, right, is to
package their experience, their knowledge, their skills into online courses, membership sites, masterminds, things like that. And some of my students are interested in one-on-one coaching, and that's how I started. So, I run two businesses, and one's on the music side and music production, and then this online space teaching people online business. But I started this second business kind of like you did through one-on-one coaching, just because people were hearing about me making money in this random audio music niche. They wanted to know how to do it in their other niches. Some guys were fitness guys. They had a gym, like, hey, how do I take this online? And I didn't know the fitness space, but I knew the online space. So I started to do one-on-one coaching. And that's how this second business started. And then I was like, well, I'm already running another business, so I can't coach all the time. I don't want to coach all the time. So for me, I don't mind doing it with clients that I think are a perfect fit and it's good money and I like them, but I want to have courses because that's my bread and butter. So a lot of what I'm teaching people is the same thing: courses, automation funnels. You're doing the ClickFunnels thing, all that stuff. How would you say you scaled from one-on-one coaching to having courses as well? And then even with elite CEOs, like, what does the mix look like for you in terms of, because you said there's multiple employees, it's a big company. Are you doing a ton of one-on-one coaching? Have you tried to focus on group coaching or masterminds? Or do you have like a product suite that kind of allows people to get in at different price points, but allows you and your business to scale? And how would you suggest people consider coaching high ticket as part of their whole suite, I suppose?
Yeah, no, great question. So yeah, for me, the biggest reason, I guess the first reason I got into high ticket was when I finally hired my first coach. That's what they suggested. I mean, I probably was going to do whatever they said, right? But I think for me, when I look at courses versus coaching and then how to use them synergistically, is typically with a course, the way I view it, at least, like, I always think of stuff with ads, right? Now most beginners are not going to start with ads, but I go, what's going to be easier for me to sell at scale with paid ads? Is it going to be a high ticket or a course? Now, this is obviously just my opinion, but I feel like with a course, there's a lot more skills that a beginner has to master to have success. So, maybe better copy skills, maybe, especially copy, I'd say a better sales page. They're going to have to be a little better at marketing. The benefit really of selling something over the phone is that you don't really have to be good at any of those things, as long as you can get them to the phone call, because once they're on the phone, all the stuff that they were unsure about, they can ask you and you can clarify. So there's a lot more trust. Like, I would say that besides an in-person meeting, a phone call is the highest level of trust before someone will buy, versus a sales page, which is why you see a lot of courses, they have to sell a little bit lower because the trust will just not be as high, because this is $2,000. Like, I don't even know this guy. Yeah, his video seems okay, but there's going to be a little more hesitation. So that was the biggest thing. In terms of your clients, if they were trying to incorporate that, you can do it one of two ways. You can use it as a value ladder where only your best clients will ascend to that, or you can pitch everyone the highest thing. And then if they don't, it doesn't work well for them, then you sell them some of the courses. So the way it works for me now is very interesting. Is we'll basically sell, and ads is a different game. And that's why I say it this way, so ads are getting more expensive. It's more competitive. So typically, if you want to sell a course at scale without a big, long webinar and things of that nature, you're probably looking at around $97, $47, $97 range. And so what we do right now is we'll run a course on the front end that we sell for $97. We're looking for our average order value with the upsells will be about $220. So we're looking to get a purchase for about $450. But the reason we're able to spend that much is because we're hoping that within 90 days, they'll buy, a percentage of those people will buy the high ticket program, which allows you to spend more and grow a bigger company, right? In terms of the high ticket, we usually try to offer that first, and we still run ads to that. And then if they're on the phone, the sales team will downsell to something cheaper if it's not a fit or they can't afford it or what have you. In terms of the coaching side, I think something that's interesting is a lot of times when people talk about coaching, there seems to be an assumption that you're doing the coaching yourself. And so, just so everyone knows, when I started, I had 20 clients that I coached myself. And then at that point, I was like, okay, I have enough money to pay someone full-time to coach. And since that time, I've never coached anyone else besides a very few selected clients. So the clients that I coach now are all paying me, 6 figures a year, and they're my highest level clients who've already gone through some of my programs. They know my processes, and they're in a point where they just want to talk to the CEO versus the CEO's team. Simple as that. So, but they barely bother me. And I'm sure you'll find that some of the clients who pay the most money, they're the easiest clients because they're not really looking, they don't value this interaction as what they're paying for. They're paying for kind of the strategy. So, and that's how I think too. Like if I ask a higher level individual a question, I just want him to tell me exactly what I need to know so that I don't waste time doing the wrong things. So I would say that, for most of your clients, the best way to do it would either be, anyone who buys their course, you try to ascend to your high ticket, which is what we do. So if you buy our $97 course, we'll start sending you more retargeting ads. We'll start calling you, we'll text you. Or B, sell your high ticket and you can have your course as a downsell. So we have a 2K course, we have a 4K, we have a 1K, and they're all for different levels. But it's nice because as you get bigger in your company, you need to have more options for people. As a beginner, I wouldn't do that much. I always like to specify, like, I'm not a beginner anymore. So I think as a beginner, you don't really want to have maybe more than 2 options, because what ends up happening is, people think, well, hey, I'm making $10,000 a month. Should I have a downsell course? Well, how much more money is that going to make you? $500. Okay, well, do you really care if you make 10,000 or 10,500 for all that extra effort? Not really. And so that's usually why I like high ticket, because if they make an extra 2 sales, that could be potentially an extra $6,000. So if you're making 10 grand, you just doubled, more than 50% increase your income. So it depends on the person. I mean, some people don't like high ticket. Some people like courses. The reason for me, I'm just a fan of high ticket is I just think for most keyword, there's always, the outliers, but I think for most beginners, it's the easiest because they have to have the least amount of skill and they have the highest chance to be successful because they only have to get one person to say yes to make that $3,000 or $1,500 versus with a course, depending on what you're selling it for, you have to get a lot more yeses, which typically takes a little bit, in my opinion, higher skill in marketing and copy. So the cool thing is that what I've seen is anything can literally work, right? It's just, I would just say, like, guys like you and me, it's our job as coaches to try to give the person the best chance to be successful. And that's usually why I'm a proponent of high ticket, because I feel like after everything I've seen, to me, it seems to be the easiest path to get to where they want versus another way. But I think absolutely at the end of the day, when you get to a high level, you're doing 7 figures a year, 8 figures a year, you definitely have to use them synergistically, because the cost, especially when you're running a lot of ads like I do, it starts to get so expensive and so out of whack that if you're not willing to use other products or courses to liquidate your ad spend, I don't know if we'll need to define that. Liquidate just means, for anyone who's watching, just, I don't even know the best way to define it, but we'll just leave them to Google that. Yeah. But ultimately, you're going to have to do that at some point.
Yeah, you got to pay for the ad somehow, and it has to. The ad spend really determines what the products are in a lot of ways when it gets really high.
And just to finalize and wrap up, I will say that it's all dependent on your goals. So, for if someone wants to do $1 million a month, there's easier ways to hit $1 million a month. If someone's like, hey, I just want to make $5,000 a month, you may not need to do the same things I'm doing. And so that's why I'm very open-minded. But anyways, I hope that makes sense and it wasn't too all over the place, but that's kind of my whole bird's eye view of that perspective.
Oh, no. Yeah, it made total sense. I mean, there was a lot there, but thanks for your transparency on how it's working for you now. And I think it's a great place to end, where you got back to 2 things that I think are always true in the online space. And what's hard is when you follow a person, whoever your guru is, you're like, that's the only way to make money online. What you said is that everything works. And every person I connect with that's doing stuff at a high level like you are, I always love seeing what worked at the beginning for them, or what was the thing that is their thing. And for you, high ticket coaching was early on what worked for you. But so I've seen everything work. I've seen low ticket work, like really, really low ticket. And I've seen mid-price courses. I've seen it all. So I think everything works. And then I think where you ended as well as is what is your goal? Like, and really, like, I love what you said about if you have the example of making 10,000 a month, but if you had a downsell that only made you 500 extra, not to poo poo an extra $500 a month, but if it's a lot of work, you really have to think about, like, is it worth it for my goal? So don't just do everything that everyone's doing just because it works. Like, they have to work together, what you want, and then what's going to get you there.
Like, so my clients, just to give you an example of that, they go, well, Tanner, you tell us only do high ticket and not to have a course. Well, why you have a course? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing $1 million plus a month. And so if I get an extra 100 grand from a course, that helps pay for some of the ads. Is that worth it? Yeah. If you get an extra $1,000, does that really change your life anymore? No. Okay. So why are you going to make all this time take away from what you're doing that's working to create a new course and a new sales page? That's kind of where I'm going with that, and it's like you said, at the end of the day, I just think all people have to do is they just need to find someone who's ahead of them, who's living the lifestyle they want, and just do whatever that person says. And then either way, it's going to work or it's not going to work. And then you can pivot and adjust. And that's all I did. And for me, it was just high ticket coaching worked so fast, so quickly. Why would I do anything else? It makes no sense. It wouldn't make sense for me to preach to other people something that, like, I didn't actually do that changed my life. So I think, to your point, like, I try to be very open-minded and let people do what they want to do. I just preach what I think is the easiest from my perspective and what works for me. But I mean, I'd be naive to say I've seen anything work for different people. So it really just comes down to how much work that person's willing to put in. And even if something is harder, if that's what you want to do, go for it. Just know it might be a little harder, but it doesn't mean it can't work. It just means, you'll have to work a little bit harder to get there. But anyways, just like a coach's perspective, I'm always thinking, what's the easiest path to get to success? And that's where a lot of my viewpoint comes from.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I appreciate that's you're sharing what you actually believe in, because it's actually worked for you. So it is always hard to teach people to go somewhere you haven't been. So, like, for me, I don't run ads. And so, like, I don't teach ads because that's not how I built my business. It's all organic. It's all content.
You just proved my point, right? You just proved my point. So if you're teaching people how to run courses without ads, I'm actually more a fan of that, because I'm like, hey, well, if you're not running ads, then the risk goes way down. It doesn't scare me as much now that you even say that, you know what I mean? So I think that just kind of proved my point. Like, depending on what your goals are and what you're doing, perspectives change and strategies change. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and that's great. And that's why I wanted to have you on when we got connected, because I know your world is very different than mine, but I see so much value in that. So I wanted to open up my students' minds a bit to maybe adding this, because I know some of them already do coaching. So I hope this has been super valuable, because I think there's a ton of nuggets that you dropped. I know you've got something that you wanted to hook our people up with if they really want to dive a little bit deeper with your process for coaching. You said you had a mini course you wanted to offer them. Can you point people to where they can go to get access to that?
Yeah, guys. So I have a 5-step video course where basically it walks you through all the things I was talking about in terms of, if you wanted to implement high ticket. They're about 5-10 minutes each, not very long. It's free. So you just go to eliteceos.com and then /mini course, all one word, mini course, eliteceos.com/mini course. And then you just put in your information and it sends you right to it. And you guys can kind of go through that and visually see the things I'm talking about. So it's a little bit more clear for you, because I know sometimes audio is one thing, but when you can visually see it as well, it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think that'll be helpful. And thanks for your time, dude, and hanging out with us today. This is a really, really fun conversation.
Yeah, Graham, thanks so much for having me, man. I really appreciate you. And I hope this was helpful for some people.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tanner.